A newcomer could go from one agency to the other, and their intake is already done. They don't have to be asked the same questions. They're not asked to repeat themselves or show identification repeatedly. As far as they're concerned, they're moving within one big system.
I'm Mayor Burstein from the Pathways to Prosperity Partnership, and I'm here with Bill Sinclair, who is the chairperson of the Toronto South Local Immigration Partnership. We're going to be talking about the measures that Toronto South has put in place to better coordinate services in Toronto South. And Bill, I wonder if we could begin by just having you tell us why your LIP decided to focus on service coordination as a core strategy.
I think what is the essential nature of the geographic area of Toronto South is that it has been the settlement reception center for the city and largely for, or maybe the province, for over 100 years. And certainly wave after wave of immigration that built the city of Toronto has passed through the neighborhoods that we associate with Toronto South. Many of them have even left their names on the neighborhoods, Chinatown, Little Italy, Little Portugal, Greektown, Koreatown, and even Corktown. And so waves of immigration have moved through and left their mark. But even today, there's still over 250,000 immigrants who live in those neighborhoods. So it's a significant part of the population and a significantly high number of people to work with. The other nature of Toronto South is that because of these waves of immigration, we have built up a very rich and mature social infrastructure. Not just the municipal services of libraries and parks and housing and public health, but also originally church-based, but later charity-based organizations and settlement services, all founded from different perspectives and in different ways, some multi-service and some single service, some ethno-specific and some multicultural, all working together in a very mature kind of landscape, but all developed without a plan. There was never any plan to how they were developed or where they were located. And so I think now we're at the position where we can say, these are the resources Toronto South has to work with. These are the assets. These are the people in Toronto South and who have needs and also strengths and assets. And how do we coordinate this to make the best possible outcomes?
So what does this actually look like in practice?
Well, in practice, one of the first things we did, as well as having our council itself, which all local immigration partnerships formed, was we formed a Partnership and Service Coordination Standing Committee. And it's a standing committee of the council. It's our only standing committee. And really it was created from the first day to be a think tank on collaboration and service coordination and to drive pilot projects and new service coordination ideas. And so a smaller group of folks who were interested in service collaboration who could help lead the council and report to the council on this process. And out of that, all of our different projects have come from that.
What does coordination actually look like on the ground in practice?
At the moment, we're working on 4 pilot projects. There are also some others. One is a common intake and assessment form. So a small number of our council members are piloting common intake and assessment so that when newcomers, the no wrong door approach, a newcomer could go from one agency to the other and their intake is already done. They don't have to be asked the same questions. They're not asked to repeat themselves or show identification repeatedly. As far as they're concerned, they're moving within one big system and that they've told their story and had their intake. And so we have 4 or 5 organizations in one corner of Toronto South who's piloting that. A second is a common outreach. It was another strategy we were looking at. And we have 2 pilots going on in 2 different corners of Toronto South, where a small number of organizations are piloting a welcome brochure that includes information that newcomers need when they first arrive and information on what their local services are. And we're piloting that in 2 neighborhoods with differences so that we can try to see which one is better. The goal is that rather than individual organizations, you sometimes will go to the library and there's 18 flyers there. We're trying to do more of a harmonized, welcome package. It's really a welcome package flyer for a settlement that includes information about all of their local assets. The third is common staff training. So we're doing a pilot project on common staff training. We've done about 14 trainings, and it's really been enthusiastically embraced by the members of the council. Surprisingly, a lot of settlement workers felt that they were working in isolation. They were feeling overwhelmed by the needs they were presented with. Many of our agencies are relatively small, so there's not a lot of mentors or support to fall upon. And they never really had the opportunity or the time to get out and to visit other centers. So, but coming together for these 14 training sessions we've had last year has been an opportunity for them to get to know each other, learn new expert skills, and really kind of build a community of practice, which didn't exist before. And then a fourth is we have another group pilot project on common research. And we had in one corner of the LIP a small group of organizations do a research project that was of common interest to multiple agencies and is feeding into the whole LIP Council. They were looking at issues around the precarity of employment and some of the challenges of private career colleges. So often newcomers are being recruited by private career colleges, and are they getting the benefits that they should? And so we're trying to look at that and share the learnings across all the council members.
So, Bill, would you say that service coordination would also include response to a particular crisis?
Mm-hmm. And although it's early in our process to do evaluation of how the LIP is functioning, we're only in the first year of our implementation cycle. By building trust and relationships through councils, organizations have come together and responded to needs in the community outside of the specific LIP projects. And a good example is the Roma community in Toronto South, where there was quite an influx that occurred very quickly, and very quickly organizations needed to get together and come up with a service plan. For whatever reason, the goal was not to create a Roma agency or not a separate piece of infrastructure, but how to integrate them into the current infrastructure, how to make the most of those language speakers that were most helpful at this time, and cultural competency of certain agencies that others didn't have. And they came together relatively quickly, and I think 5 or 6 agencies, and formed a Roma working group and came up with an action plan.
When you talk about services being coordinated, are we talking here about immigration or immigrant-specific services, or is it cast a little more broadly?
Our goal is to be cast a little bit more broadly. For example, our common intake and assessment form includes a settlement agency, a community health center, a community legal clinic, as well as a community information center. So organizations that don't all have different kinds of funding and regulations that guide them, but are all used by the same newcomer in the course of their settlement journey. So being able to move from talking to their nurse, to talking to their legal worker, to talking to their settlement worker with a common intake and shared consent forms and things like that is definitely the goal of the common intake, is not just having people move between one settlement provider and another, or move from one English class to another English class, although that's important too.
What results have you achieved? And do you think it's too early to speak to that, or can you say something about results?
It is. I mean, we're just in the first year of trying the pilots, and in fact, a couple of them are still in the design phase, so are still going out the door. And we don't have enough newcomer feedback on what the impact is, or service provider feedback on whether it's really made the difference. We spent most of the year actually designing the intake form, designing the welcome package. The training was delivered fairly quickly, and all the feedback on that has been very positive. And the research happened very quickly because of the ability to get some resources behind it relatively quickly. But some of these other measures are a bit harder. But they're also pilots because there's over 40 members of our council in Toronto South, and probably twice as many service access points that newcomers are accessing, so more than 80 service access points. And to do something like a common intake or assessment over 80 partners is just going to be our future challenge after we through the pilot get the bugs out of the small version.
To what would you attribute the successes that you've had?
We've been fortunate in Toronto South to have a lot of capacity. Great organizations, as I say, some organizations over 100 years old, very mature organizations that are on a solid basis. Also, the recent COIA, the Canada-Ontario Immigration Agreement, brought new and fresh resources to the sector just prior to the local immigration partnerships being funded, and that allowed a lot of people to build their internal capacity as organizations, including the capacity to partner, to do strategic planning, to do innovation, and so forth. We're also fortunate, being Toronto South being a bit of a hub in the city, we have great diversity of members. Very, very small organizations, very large organizations, including university and several hospitals, large city departments, including police and community housing and public health. Also, the headquarters of several francophone organizations that cover citywide, but have a lot of traction in Toronto South, and the school board. So quite a diverse membership that come to the table, and a lot of good perspectives and insights to bring to the table.
So one of the things you mentioned to me before, Bill, was the issue of duplication of services.
Mm-hmm. And that was initially one of the concerns that people had when they weren't sure about what the LIP was for or what it was going to mean to them. They were worried about the autonomy of their organizations, whether the organizations might be forced into mergers, or whether they could have resources pulled away from them, whether they're going to lose funding by entering into partnerships, or by even talking about issues that are related to duplication. So we had to talk openly about how to make the best use of resources, how to enhance services with resources, and obviously to ensure that there's no duplication, but also how services in the same neighborhood can build upon each other, or can work together in different ways. So an integration agenda as opposed to an amalgamation agenda or a defunding agenda. And that's a challenge, because it's not something that a lot of organizations were familiar with, and even still, and also with some pretty new and potentially surprising partners at the table: school boards, hospitals, universities. What does this mean to a small community agency, and to their role in the future, and to the resources that they need to keep their doors open? So that was a factor that we had to work on and sell the agenda of service coordination as how do we get the best outcomes for the newcomer, and which is always our end goal, is how do we take this basket of resources and get the best outcomes.